Welcome to Over a Barrel Live, right here on the channel that you happen to be watching. It could be YouTube, it could be X, formerly known as Twitter, it could be all over the place. I'm Matt McLean. He is Patrick DeHaan. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we go any further, and I even ask how Patrick is doing, make sure that you like or subscribe the channel, obviously, and all of those things. If you happen to be just coming upon this particular video, and make sure that you get it to where you can get the future feeds as well. We don't often do live, but this time around, Patrick insisted.
Give it a
I
shot.
said, okay, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Friday. What the heck? Everything goes. And now we can watch your comments on X in real time. So if you'd like to throw those comments out there, Gas Buddy Guy, you're Over a Barrel Matt. So we have an idea for what we want to talk about today, but we certainly can be open to answering some of the questions that you guys have.
Absolutely. There's a lot to discuss, as a matter of fact. And also, if I'm not mistaken, you've already got one question from a viewer / listener, because we're also on Spotify and everything, the audio side as well. So talk to us about a little bit of what this individual, because they're addressing it to you. So what is it that they are asking at this point?
Yeah, Matt. Well, let me get into the inbox here and pull that message up. But a lot of this conversation had come up. Some of the folks out there in my feed and myself need premium in our cars. There's a lot more vehicles that have required premium here in the last, decade or two. And so some of us are stuck filling up with the good stuff, if you want to call it that. This comment comes from Derek on X, who shot me a message at Gas Buddy Guy, wanting to hear a little bit more about the jump in premium consumption. I had tweeted out a comment that according to Gas Buddy data now, 20%, 1 in 5 gallons that's transacted on the Pay with Gas Buddy card is now that premium gasoline. And a lot of people have noticed that the difference between regular and premium gasoline has just exploded, right? It used to be 10 cents a gallon. Gas might have been $2.50, mid-grade $2.60, premium $2.70. And now it's like regular could be $2.50 and mid-grade would be $3 and premium would be $3.50. So that grade gap has gone from 20 cents. Now at my local Shell, it's I think $1.20 more. And everyone's asking kind of, is the station gouging? Are they just raising prices or what's going on? So, as I mentioned, more people are buying premium. And that's kind of the difference here, is that you need different components to put in that premium, right? Because you click the button that may say 91, 92, or 93 octane. And that's really the big difference, is what goes into it. And that's the cost difference. In fact, I was mentioning last week that the wholesale difference, it does vary region by region. You go out to California, Matt, and premium gasoline is still only, 30 or 40 cents more because the way refineries are set up.
So you bring me to that question. Why has premium become so much more expensive than it once was? I remember back in the day, because I'm dating myself, where premium, it used to be regular unleaded was like one price, then 10 cents higher, it was like the mid-grade, and then 10 more cents beyond that, It was like premium. Now it's definitely not that. It's like $1 more. And so the question that I would have is, why? It's the same octane as it used to be, so why is there such a difference?
Yeah, well, again, a lot of that is just because new vehicle models are often requiring higher octane gasoline. Part of this really stems back to the CAFE standards implemented by the Obama administration. Basically, the corporate average fuel economy, CAFE, the Biden administration and has now often done this too with tailpipe emissions. Essentially, you're forcing manufacturers, their fleet, so Ford, right, across all the vehicles Ford produces, they have to have an average fuel economy that continues to increase. And so what manufacturers have done in many instances is take their internal combustion engines and make them more efficient with things like turbochargers that shove more air into the engine.
Right.
And more essentially pressure. You get more efficiency adding something like a turbo or supercharger, but oftentimes because of the amount of air density in the engine, you need a fuel that's more resistant to pre-ignition. Basically, if the fuel explodes too early, you can have catastrophic engine damage. And that's where the octane of that gasoline plays a big role, is that octane measures the ability of gasoline to resist ignition. And so essentially premium gasoline, Matt, you can put under more pressure and it won't ignite as easily. And manufacturers can program their engine computers, what we call ECUs or PCMs, to basically take advantage of the resistance and basically can operate higher horsepower under more pressure, and that makes a vehicle well, essentially, it's more efficient. So there's a lot more vehicles running around that need premium, as evidenced by that data I was just mentioning. That more gallons are being sold as premium, but you know, oil refineries don't change overnight, and the problem with
Right.
right is that back in what the 80s and 90s, premium consumption started to decline and manufacturers really haven't kept up with this kind of change. And that's
So basically, it's a supply and demand issue. Is that what I'm hearing you
yeah,
say? For the most part, it's far more vehicles are requiring it. Therefore, there's a little bit less of a supply to go around, so to speak, per person. And that's why we're now paying so much more for premium.
correct. The kind of blending component that's in shorter supply is called alkylate. It's a very high octane component. It generally would be somewhere in the ballpark of 104 to 106 octane. Alkylate capacity is what has lagged behind. Refineries can't produce as much premium gasoline without additional alkylate. And so alkylate
Gotcha.
demand has gone up. And because capacity of alkylate has been slow to go up, there's been a price differential that continues to expand. The good thing, Matt, is that with premium prices having gone up, this has caught the eye of some companies that are now investing in increasing alkylate capacity. In fact, as I throw this article on the stage, this is happening, and basically more alkylate production will eventually stand to bring that premium gap back down. But for now,
Ah, okay.
yeah, stations oftentimes don't look at what they are paying for premium like they do regular, right? Because 80% of their sales are regular. They're often fixated on making sure that their margin is good for regular, but they don't look at premium so much. And in some instances, stations are actually selling premium kind of at their cost, their grade gap. They're not making any more on it.
Hmm.
Where the profit is coming is it's for refineries that do produce premium are the ones that are capturing kind of the economics behind this.
So I have a question about premium that I know you've got an answer for. I have always heard that premium gasoline burns cleaner and is less harmful for the environment. Is that accurate?
There may be some truth to that. I think a lot of manufacturers, you'll drive by the station, or a lot of refiners, I should say, gas stations market their premium gasoline in a different way, right? They may
Yeah,
add
like crystal clear, and I'm not going to put in the rest of that, but yes, and
not
you,
crystal
yeah,
clear Pepsi, but yeah, there may be some
right.
secret ingredients in that. They may add additional detergents or additives, right? And some of them you've heard of. You can go to the auto parts store, right? And they say, we put this in your gasoline. So there's a different way to market it. A lot of a lot of Americans now know through studies that have been done by companies like Consumer Reports, right? And Gas Buddy. We basically say if your car doesn't need premium, don't buy it because you're literally your car can't take advantage of it. You're literally flushing money down a toilet. But
And potentially raising the price for vehicles that does need it because of the supply situation as well.
right, yeah. So exactly right. You're exacerbating an issue that exists because there's not enough premium capacity. So definitely, if you don't need it, there's not really a point to using it unless you're one of those folks that really does well and wants to decide, hey, I'm just gonna do this. So I was going to share a graphic here real quick that I put out for my subscribers. Um, this is basically only since 2022, Matt. If you look at the blue, this is the amount of regular gasoline being sold. And if you look very carefully, kind of over time, over the last 2 years, premium has been, about 20%. Mid-grade, the Dodge vehicles out there, anyone that has Dodge, some of the vehicles
Yeah.
that Dodge produces still require mid-grade, which is kind of crazy. Um, But
If
yeah,
it
I mean,
wasn't for that, would we still need mid-grade?
probably, no,
And
not really. I don't
and
think there's any other manufacturer out there.
really, because I've got several stations that have 5 options. I guess the blending that it does right there at the pump itself, like 87 octane, 88 octane, 89. It gives you like 5 different octane options there on the pump.
Yeah.
That's not even necessary, is it? Like if I
Well, I
chose
mean,
88, is it really going to matter?
well, additional octane, can't hurt. But for somebody like me, my motorcycles require at least 90. So if I fill up one tank with 93 and then mix 87 in the next tank, you might be able to get right at that 90, right? Because like what Dodge does, some of the vehicles require 89. So theoretically, if you fill up with 91 tank and 87, you'll net out about 89 octane. So
Hmm.
but those are blender pumps. Those are really interesting because a lot of Americans don't realize that mid grade, most of the time now at newer stations, mid grade is just a blend that's controlled by the pump. It's a blend of, a little bit of premium gasoline blended with regular gasoline. And we call those blender pumps. And a lot of new pumps have that flexibility to blend on demand. It's basically like one of those fancy Coke machines, right? That mixes whatever, if you want cherry Coke, vanilla Coke, orange Coke, right? It mixes them on site. And that's kind of what a blender pump does. Is it takes a couple different feedstocks and it puts them together to get to what the pump sticker says, whether it's, 87, 88, 89. I've gone to Indiana and some of the pumps have had like literally 5 different options. It's like, what do I want today?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I pulled up to a pump the other day that had 7 options and 3 different nozzles. One for the regular unleaded, one for E85, and one for diesel.
Wild.
And so I'm sitting there. Plus, it had a video on the screen and a live stream going on. So my ADHD was really working well because I'm going, oh, look, let me watch this TV. Oh, wait, which selection do I need to pick? Okay, let's pick that one, right? So there was a lot going on that pump. So it was quite entertaining for me. But the E85, that's the other question that I have for you. Obviously, you don't want to use E85 fuel unless you have a vehicle that is specifically designed for that. It's just as bad for your vehicle, I would assume, as trying to, which it would be almost
Oh, it's
impossible to do.
misfueling, right? It'd
Yeah,
be like
right,
putting diesel in your car. Maybe not quite like putting diesel in your car, but your car has to, the manufacturer is programming your car's computer based on the fuels that it's telling you to use. And if you
right.
put something in there that's different, the size of your injectors, or depending on the time of year, startability becomes problematic for E85 in the winter. So what is usually about E70 or E75 in the summer goes down to about E50 in the winter because it's a little harder to start a vehicle in colder weather. Right. That's why we also have differences between winter and summer gasoline. Winter gasoline that's not E85 has more butane. Butane is much easier to start in colder temperatures. So E85, yeah, if you don't have a vehicle that's flex fuel, you don't want to use E85. Most of the components, it's not going to be like putting diesel in it, but it's still misfueling. You don't want to do it.
Well, speaking of fueling, I know that, like, for example, in Florida, whenever the heat is always there and whatnot, they have like the temperature sensitivity or whatever at the pump. Help me understand sometimes when it comes to temperature and the temperature of the fuel itself. Isn't there like a little bit of a situation at the gas stations where they have to regulate that a little bit to make sure that you're getting what the screen is showing, the quantity of fuel that you're getting?
Yeah, temperature correction is an interesting one. If you're in a cold climate, you may potentially get more gasoline than what the pump says, right? Because at cold temperatures, gasoline is more dense. Essentially, 1 gallon is a little bit more than that. It's the volume that changes. And if you're down in Florida, for example, where it's like 90 and 95 degrees, stations also have warm weather correction. So, if you're in Florida, they probably don't have cold weather correction because it very rarely gets cold.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, to your point, there's a lot of myths that are spun out of this, but some people have had tips, go fill up in the morning because the underground storage tank is colder. You may get a little bit more gasoline than you're paying for. A lot of that comes down to temperature correction There's temperature correction on both sides of the spectrum, whether cold or hot. So if you're in Canada, they probably have cold weather correction because the station otherwise is basically going to be giving away free gasoline. So a lot of stations have that nowadays. Speaking of stations, something I had never seen before, I filled up the other day, Matt. It was actually really cool. Worth mentioning that we're talking about this. So you know how stations have those bins, right, with the squeegees and the fluid to clean your windshield,
Oh yeah.
right?
I
And
use it regularly.
they have
Yes.
trash. They're often one receptacle. You have a trash bin in the middle, and then you have your paper towels and your squeegee
Yep.
with fluid to clean your windshield.
Mhm.
And this one brand new station I went to actually had a connection, like it was a hose was connected to the receptacle, so you never have to worry about running out of the windshield solvent. It
Oh.
literally had like a little hose directed to one of the big poles, right, that
Yeah.
holds the canopy up, and there was a massive tank of solvent in the post that holds the canopy up. And so every one of these receptacles was hooked up to a small hose that makes sure it always has windshield solvent.
Now, I have never seen that before. That's pretty interesting. And I would assume the solvent would be slightly fresher as well, because sometimes after it gets used a lot in that little bin,
It gets
uh,
dirty. Like,
it
I don't
gets
know if people
grimy.
are
Yeah.
like driving through the mud, they come through and you're like, what is this?
Bug guts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this
So
this would seemingly make it just a slightly more ability to make it cleaner, I guess, to go. That's pretty cool.
yeah, it was wild. So, I mean, one of those things, you go to a gas station. How many times have I gone to a station, or you've gone to a station? You're like, I'm going to clean your windshield. I'm going to clean my windshield. You're like, nope, I won't, because there's no fluid, or the brush
Right.
disappears, or, something like that. This is real
Absolutely.
American ingenuity.
No doubt. It's kind of, and by the way, I did look several podcasts ago. Patrick asked me to go. I had brought up the gas pumps not too far from where I'm sitting that actually took whole American dollars right at the pump. It had the whole everything. And I drove by that station specifically to take pictures because Patrick wanted pictures. They have now replaced those pumps, and they do not have the cash option right at the pump anymore, sadly. So I was unable to grab pictures for Patrick. So my apologies
Oh,
on that. So I do have one other question. We have got a lot of heat going on right now across portions of the country. People that don't normally see temperatures this hot, like Maine, for example, where it is one of the 50 states, I probably, other than Alaska, that has the least amount of air conditioners in their in their homes, and yet right now they've got heat indices above 100 degrees. Some of the physical temperatures, actual temperatures, are approaching that century mark as well.
yeah.
Are we going to start running into refinery issues? I know that extreme cold and extreme heat can have a problem on refineries. Understandably, we're just a few days into this, but we are talking about, more like a heat dome that
Yeah.
may go on for potentially, from what I'm talking to forecasters, weeks. So
Yeah.
there's a cumulative effect, I would think, at that particular point. So talk to us about that. Are you concerned that we may start seeing some issues as this heat lingers?
Well, we've seen one here I pulled up, the Phillips 66 refinery downstate, outside St. Louis in Roxana, Illinois, had a pretty big issue. Now, it's unrelated, maybe unrelated to the heat. We don't really know. All we know is that the temperature was 86 degrees, which is fairly warm. And to your point, yeah, refineries in the north are usually better protected against the cold weather,
Right.
and in the south they're better protected against the warm weather. Again, kind of one of those environmental differences is but yeah, we had this a couple 2 summers ago, Matt, where refineries in the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle, like they're not used to 90 and 100 degree weather, and yeah, heat can be problematic. Refineries operate
Right.
under a lot of heat, but typically cooling is a huge focus of refineries because some of this equipment, right, has normal operating temperatures. And when your ambient temperature is 90, 95, absolutely that can pose a big threat, because cooling, kind of like back in the 80s and 90s when you'd regularly see vehicles pulled off on the side of the road, right? Because their radiator, back then cooling capacity was just not what it is today. but there still can be issues with 95-degree weather that can cause refineries to have to slow down their throughput. So to your point, yes, heat, environmental heat, weather conditions absolutely can play a role, just like back in 2021 too, the freezing weather down in Texas, right? And freezing weather in areas that you're not accustomed to seeing freezing weather, whether that be Texas or Louisiana, that can also slow refineries down. So absolutely, we're keeping a close eye on refinery operations, especially this heat dome, right, in areas of the upper Midwest, the Great
Oh
Lakes.
yeah. It's
You
all over
know,
the place. Midwest, the Northeast, East Coast. We've even had some tropical development. Obviously, nothing major in the Gulf of Mexico already. There's a lot of weather conditions that could create some hiccups that I know has you very, very busy monitoring everything to make sure. Yeah, there you go, right there.
yeah.
We've got some issues. And I will say that there has been a slight reprieve because of the tropical system. Some areas that earlier this week were predicting 100 degrees. Take, for example, where I'm at right now in the upper south. We were cooled off by a lot of cloud cover from the tropical event that took place there in the Gulf of Mexico, and that was not originally expected. Well, today, guess what? No cloud cover, and it is already well into the 90s. So now we are about to join, along with St. Louis and other aspects, where this extreme heat dome. So this could get interesting. It even looks like it's hot in Chicago, where you are.
Oh, it's been toasty. I will say that there are refineries peppered throughout here. You have Country Mark in Indiana. You have the BP refinery here in Northwest Indiana. You have the ExxonMobil, the Citgo refinery here in Lamont, Illinois. ExxonMobil in Joliet. You have the Phillips 66 down here near St. Louis. And then Detroit, you have Marathon in Detroit. There's a bunch of refineries. Now, obviously, this is U.S. graphic. Just imagine it spilling over into Canada because there's a lot of refineries just outside of Detroit in Sarnia, Ontario. The heat dome, well, they may be getting a little bit of reprieve from Lake Erie, but Lake Erie is one of those lakes that's very shallow and warms up very quickly. So it may not be much of a reprieve. And then you have a bunch of refineries here in northern Ohio, Toledo, throughout here. I'm just trying to think downstate. There is a refinery in Catlettsburg, Kentucky that may not be as impacted. I'm trying to think. I think
Memphis. There's a refinery in Memphis.
Yep. Valero refinery in Memphis. So there's a lot of refineries through here that we'll have it to keep an eye on over the next week. And, I haven't heard of any other major outages yet. Thankfully, after some of the Euro models were forecasting triple-digit heat, they did back off a little bit on that. So,
well, let's hope it stays that way. But, it's typical summer, but yet it's not. That heat dome, for example, and we all seem to be coming up with new terminologies, for different types. We've got
heat wave is so old, right? It's not just a heat wave anymore.
Yeah, and we've got what is it in the winter time that we call this major thing that polar
vortex?
Yeah, I'm like, when did we? I mean, okay, so we're creating new names for things that happened in the past as well. We just didn't call them that. So we've got this heat dome. Obviously, it looks like it could last for a lengthy period of time. Talking to a friend of mine who's a meteorologist, and he was also concerned about flash drought. We've had a lot of flash flooding across portions of the Midwest, the Northeast, and upper South over the past few months. And he is now concerned about flash drought, where all of a sudden the clouds dissipate, go away, and then we have another problem where we've got issues like that, which then creates more and higher temperatures, which is why I'm bringing it up. The humidity starts lowering because it gets dry outside, and therefore the physical temperature starts going higher, which could create some problems for refineries as well.
Speaking of weather,
there's a lot there. Yep, there you go. There's a tropical little disturbance there off the east coast of Florida. Boy, that's bringing back some memories whenever I worked in broadcasting there. And there's your spaghetti models, the GFS.
Yeah, thankfully here, this green is tropical storm status. So this is going to be just another soaking for Florida.
Yeah. And they've had plenty over the past, few weeks.
Miami does not need any more. I think Sarasota, I saw some pretty tremendous flooding. So Southern Florida, something that I keep a close eye on, not so much for Florida, but the Climate Prediction Center, we look at the monitor here. See, the the extreme tip of Florida has just that changed significantly here in the
Yeah.
last week. You look at last week to current. Look at the difference.
Oh,
Um,
most definitely. Look at that. Yeah,
well,
you've
and different areas of Florida now. Look at all the areas that have been added. So a week ago, 78% of it was no drought, and now you've seen a big drop. But if you compare Florida to last week, the southern Florida had a big difference here.
Yes, it did. Yeah, and this is the time of the year. The rainy season is beginning across portions of Florida, the peninsula
Yeah, yeah. Look at
especially.
that difference in Florida.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's going to change. It traditionally, it usually changes quite a bit. The majority of the rain happens between now and let's say the middle of October when things
Monsoon
start
season.
drying up. Yeah, it's a rainy season, monsoon season. It's called different things across the globe. So that's a lot that's going on. Talk to us about price point, where we are now, where you expect us to go into the future, the next several days. Are we looking at prices increasing, decreasing, about a status quo? And I understand there's a little bit of an asterisk there simply because if we do run into some heat issues with refineries, that could create a blip on the radar for you.
Yeah.
So I won't hold you to it like I normally do because that's not your fault. But what are we looking at, Patrick, when it comes to price points at this point?
Well, Matt, we've seen a little bit of an increase. I think we did bottom out here at about 339 a gallon. For those that have been watching the price of oil, though, it has been drifting up a little bit. Last check, we're at about $82 a barrel. So, checking our live ticker here real quick. CNBC showing oil prices modestly lower, 6 cents lower. But this 81.23 is also quite a bit higher. Last week we were all the way down to the mid 70s. So oil prices have come up. Along with it, the price of wholesale gasoline, or the spot price for gasoline in the NYMEX, up at 2 cents a gallon to about 2.52 a gallon. Keep in mind that's before taxes, transit, and everything else. So, after your taxes, 2.52. You're almost over $3. Now there still are some stations, Matt, below $3 a gallon. So if we go back here to our national average, it's been, most states, the Great Lakes has seen big jumps here in the last week. If we go to the kind of the biggest increases here, Florida is an area that price cycles. Indiana price cycles, Kentucky price cycles. But if you look there, they're going the opposite way, which means in another few days, Kentucky will probably come up. So go fill up,
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah, well, see, that's the key. You took the words out of my mouth. Last week, 2 weeks ago, prices were at 293 a gallon. Then they shot up to 309, 315. Now we're back down to 297. And I just scratch my head and go, why? But here we are. So it's a price cycling situation. That's what you're saying. Does Missouri price cycle?
Yeah, it does. Areas of St. Louis, if I were to look up St. Louis here a minute, usually when you see a market that price cycles, although St. Louis looks pretty weak here, they may be fading a bit. I'll share a graphic here of an area that price cycles. You can see what it looks like.
Oh,
Grand
wow.
Rapids, Indianapolis. And if you go down to like a 3 month, this is what price cycling looks like. Up, down, up, down, up, down. And if an area that doesn't price cycle,
I
just trying
think
to think.
Kansas, you've if I remember correctly, I think you've tried Kansas before and it's fairly stable. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So this is the difference between kind of, stations that are adjusting their prices routinely on a daily basis. This price cycling is stations only are raising their price when they start losing money or they're at the replacement cost, and that's what triggers a big jump. So, keep in mind Wichita, by the way, Kansas, why it's so far down on the totem pole is because their gasoline taxes are much lower. So,
Right.
and if you look at that, just constant price cycling. And this is what it does. Actually, Tampa, let's throw Tampa on here.
Tacoma.
Oh, hey, Tampa, another area that price cycles. So again, this is what when I talk about price cycling, this is kind of the definition. Even Tampa.
It's weird because it seems like in every city, it's consistent during the cycle. So it's not like a Tampa versus a St. Louis versus a Grand Rapids. It's like if it's going to cycle up, they all cycle up together. And if they're all going to go cycle down, they're going to cycle down together at around the same day, same time.
Yeah.
What that Okay, that seems a little odd to me. Like,
Well, so here's how it
that
works:
seems
is
ominous.
every state moves a little independently. So if we do Michigan, Florida is another market that I've said price cycles, and if we take Indiana, they're all kind of on different times. Let's do
Right,
this a month. So yeah, it looks like everyone got a little bit of a bump there. If we zoom back now, thankfully, here's the reason. Look at the study. You know, for a period of 3 weeks, prices fell because wholesale gas prices were actively falling. And so that continues
right,
to lower the floor for how low prices can go. Suddenly, wholesale prices have been shooting up the first, week, and that's where stations are starting to restore. So usually, though, this behavior happens every 1 to 2 weeks in the summer and every 2 to 3 weeks in the fall. But this is what price cycling looks like. It's
yeah.
pretty maddening.
And like I said, it looks very consistent for the most part in every market. It seems to be happening at around this. And for those of you watching, I'm like this. I'm like, this is. I'm squinting in. I'm looking at the graphic, going that the reporter in me is wanting to ask a lot of questions, and because I have a lot of questions. Why is that happening the way that it is? That is very interesting, to say the least. So,
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, our
mhm,
first Over a Barrel live episode, we talked a lot about premium, but talking about prices here just a little bit. There are a couple states, Matt, that are seeing gas tax increases here, just 10 or so days from now, as we roll into July. California, the Board of Equalization, I believe they'll be seeing a 2 cent increase. Illinois also a 2 cent increase. I think Indiana is also seeing an increase. A lot of these states, by the way, are doing biannual increases July 1st and January 1st, depending on the rate of inflation. States have
right,
gotten smart and they're now tying gasoline tax fluctuations to the rate of inflation. So you're going to see some of those increases July 1st. But it probably, 2 cents, it adds up over time, but this isn't something, don't have to rush out and fill your tank up kind of thing. So,
well, that's good at least.
but I think the direction for most folks has been, pretty stable over the last week. Like I said, there's been some states where prices have gone up, some states, but if you look at this, it seems like there's a red mixed into every 3 or 4 blues.
Yeah.
Right, there's one here, here, here. So a lot of states are still going down. But I would say that I think most of the decreases probably will come to an end here as we get closer to July 4, because the price of oil has been moving up. And if you want to see what that looks like here,
That's a shame,
um,
but it's not
let's,
unexpected, right?
yeah. So, here's if we do this, I can get this to a daily thing here. If we zoom out a little bit, yeah, here's a bit of the increase that we've been seeing. Look at that. Back in early June, we were at about $73 a barrel, but overall now the price of oil has gone up about $8 a barrel. So that's why some of these decreases probably will fade away for the time being.
Gotcha. Well, that's a shame, but not totally unexpected in my brain anyway. So, well,
All
as
good things
always,
come to an end, but again, it's not going to be a spike. It's going to be kind of a moderate increase.
that's the
So
hope.
that's the good news.
Well, we'll of course make sure that if we do have sudden situations, we'll of course let you know right here. Like, subscribe to our channel, make sure that you follow us, and we'll of course be passing things along. And also any of the questions that you have. We do get questions. We have one that we started off the podcast with
Thanks,
today.
Derek, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate that very much. So, as far as everything else goes, Patrick, it looks like we're pretty good to go for this week.
Yeah, July 4 is approaching. Gas prices, stabilizing, maybe moderate increases here and there, Matt. But all in all, as I look to last year, gas prices nationally still about 11 cents lower than last year. Americans collectively going to spend a lot less this July 4. So we'll end it there. We'll see you here next time. Thanks for joining our inaugural episode of Over a Barrel Live. We'll see you next time.